on the program is the mayor of Toronto, John Tory, but of course, as you can see, I'm his guest in the still splendid City Hall of Toronto after 55 years. And I think this building started the launch of Toronto towards becoming a great city. It showed tremendous imagination at that time.
I think you're right about that, yeah.
People that I knew as a child then couldn't believe that Toronto would build such an interesting building. But here it is.
And you'll remember, of course, it was accompanied by a discussion of a willingness to tear down the old City Hall, which seems like an atrocious notion that we'd have this building that's sort of a historic building, but needed to be replaced for a variety of reasons. But here we are with both buildings here, the old one and the new one, and we still call it the new City Hall, and as you say, it's many,
well, it's
many
like the new
ago.
Democratic Party.
And it stood the test of time. It's a great sort of compliment to great architecture. It was the result, as I think some of the viewers will know, of an international architectural competition.
Indeed, it was Finnish architect.
And here it is, and people still look at it and think it's a very contemporary-looking, iconic building, and it is.
Yeah.
And
now,
here we are
in fairness to Eaton's, they were going to keep the tower of the old City Hall, but get rid of the rest of it. But there's no need for that. I mean, those Victorian buildings of that old red brick like Queen's Park aren't particularly meritorious in the abstract, but they are great landmarks. And especially at the head of Bay Street.
Well, we haven't been too good at preserving our history
I'm
here.
afraid not.
And, you know, the other thing that they've done in the city now, both the governments, is they've spent some money actually keeping these buildings up because they've been allowed to run down terribly.
Yes.
And they even looked bad. Even the stone, that's that beautiful stone underneath that actually has a nice color about it, but it had been blackened by the soot of, you know, sort of urban growth and
industrial activity.
This building is still very special after all these years.
Indeed it is. John, you're enjoying yourself as mayor. You've been here 6 months. There hasn't been too much controversy. And I just ask you about a few of the things that are current.
Sure.
Your immediate predecessor was a very controversial man. Is it fair to say, and as you know, the Fords have a great many supporters in the city, is it fair to say that in straight budgetary terms, managing the city in fiscal terms, Rob Ford was quite effective?
No, I won't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. He created the impression, and I think he did after years of quite significant spending increases, I will say he did bring those levels of spending increases down. So I will give that point. I think he did it, though, in a ham-handed way because, for example, he cut out a lot of transit routes that I have subsequently restored, because if you are trying to attract jobs and if you're trying to put people together with jobs, especially those who are, you know, finding it more difficult to find a job, those transit links are vital to them. And so I didn't restore some bus services that will never make sense because nobody rode on the bus, but I did restore some of the bus services he cut, and that's how he saved money. And he saved money by these famous kind of measures that were more, to me, about show business, by sort of cutting back on the city councilor's expense accounts. I haven't tried to restore those, but at the same time, that's not how you save the real money. The reason I say
it didn't do wonders for his ability to get measures passed, I think.
Yes, but the reason I say that he wasn't a great success, or whatever you suggested on fiscal terms, is what he really didn't do, and what I'm now trying to do is the much harder work, and you know this from having run companies, of actually trying to take out layers of management and make processes work better, because that's how you save the serious money. You know, the expense accounts are actually a very small portion of the budget.
Are you shrinking the payroll of the city?
Well, we are just, actually last year we actually increased it because we hired a bunch of new bus drivers. That's why it went up, to drive the buses that are now going to be back in service that I put back. But if you said in terms of the public service of the rest of the city, I will be seeking to achieve efficiencies through the use of technology, basic technology that every company and many other governments in Canada are using to do things in a way that's not only more efficient but more customer friendly, because you can go online and do it yourself. And if you said, do I think that gives us the opportunity to actually have some fewer numbers of people, and certainly fewer levels of management? I mean, again, the people who have been in business that are watching will know there's something called span of control. How many people does each manager oversee? And we have spans of control here that sometimes are 2 or 3 people. So you have a manager that's managing 2 or 3 people. And that's not sustainable.
And it's a caricature of bureaucracy, in effect.
Well, it is. And I think and the other thing that I don't think he addressed, and I'm not, look, you asked me a question about him. I'm not meaning this to be a beat-up session on him at all.
No.
I've moved sort of well beyond that. I never was in it. But
he's a very amiable man,
well, no,
personally.
he is an amiable man, and I think people don't know that about him. And he's trying to get better from a health issue, as a lot of people know.
We all wish him well.
But we've had a culture here that preceded him, by the way, but he also didn't fix, where public sector projects, big ones, transit projects, you know, renovations of buildings, renovations of the square in front of this building, went millions of dollars over budget and years over schedule.
Yes.
And nobody, there was no consequence to it. And I asked questions when I got in here, and I said, well, that project, whichever one it was, where did the original number come from as to what it was supposed to cost? And they would say things to me, literally, I'm not making this up, well, it was a thumbnail estimate, or it was a guesstimate, or it was a back of the napkin, calculation. We're talking like not just a few $1 million, we're talking tens and tens of millions of dollars. So what was happening was, I think in order to please sometimes political masters, people were doing these thumbnail calculations. Then that became the budget. It was obvious to anybody who would think about it that that was never going to be the budget, but then it would run way over budget. And of course, once you're starting a project, you can't stop it, or you could, but it would be unwise to do that. So this was going on routinely, and nobody was ever held to account either for the thumbnail estimate or for the end boondoggle. I'm changing that, and it's a slow process, but I'm going to change it, and I've started to change it simply by having meetings where I sit literally with a big spreadsheet in front of me and all the people who run the big project saying, are you on time, are you on budget, and if not, why not? I mean, that's how the meetings go.
If I may ask specifically, is that what happened down at Union Station? Front Street's been closed between Union Station and the Royal York Hotel for years.
The Union Station thing is more complicated, but it's partly that because they proceeded with only a portion of the real design work having been done, so it was very difficult to estimate the cost. Yes. Plus, as you might imagine with an old building, the building's been over time changed many times because it's existed since when, 1930, I think, and it's been
with the
changed
Royal
many
York,
times.
1930, and the station, I think, since the World War I.
And so they have literally these bundles of cables and conduits running through the roof of the station from days gone by, and they have absolutely no idea what they service. So the approach they're going to take, a bit oversimplified, is to say we're going to put in all the new cables and all the new conduits, and then we will one day just cut all the ones that are in those bundles and see who phones. But, when you're confronted by something like that, I mean, it does cost you more money when you suddenly see this bundle of cables that's there and you're not sure what to do about it, and, this kind of thing. So there have been complications from renovating old buildings, no different than the viewers would experience renovating an old house. But it doesn't explain, Conrad, years over time and tens of millions over budget. Yes. It's just lack of accountability.
And didn't we waste as a city, we're not pointing a finger at any individual, a very long time getting to grips with the waterfront?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think that cost us money. It just cost us opportunity. I mean, our waterfront, I was first involved in it in a sort of peripheral way 25 or 30 years ago, and literally there were like old car wrecks and old tires piled up down there on our waterfront. This precious waterfront access we have that many cities would give their eye teeth to have. Yes. So slowly but surely, it's coming into its own, and it really now is quite an attractive place to be. I was down there last weekend for a sort of festival they had, and there were tens and tens of thousands of people there.
They've done very
themselves.
nicely with Queen's
nice.
Quay, I think.
There were some mistakes made.
John, on another current issue, I don't want to get too municipal here because our viewers are all around the country, but I think there are similar questions in other cities. This business of carding, which for those who might not know, is the practice of the police of randomly stopping people if they think they may in some way be suspicious.
No, but that's so that we don't get off on the wrong part of the discussion. That's the problem. They were stopping people randomly or arbitrarily who were not in any way engaged in suspicious behavior. They were merely stopping them to think they might have some information that might end up being useful, and that was the problem. They were stopping people. And I'm now satisfied. I mean, I tried to sort of mediate a solution, if I could call it that, or a resolution to what was a problem that in particular was very strongly felt by the black community here, but by other people from visible minorities, which was that people who were innocent of any suspected or actual wrongdoing were being stopped on the street and asked questions, and the information was being recorded and put into a database. So you had a situation where somebody who might be entirely innocent was walking down the street, minding their own business. They were stopped by the police, hopefully not in a hostile way, but I wasn't there, so I don't know. But the very fact they were stopped and asked questions, when under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, it is the case that you are quite free not to stay. In our system, as you know, it's based on the theory you don't have to talk to anybody. Yes. You don't have to talk to Crown prosecutors, you don't have to talk to the police, you don't have to talk to anybody.
Well, if they insist in talking to you, they have to.
Well, they can arrest you, but even when they arrest you, you don't have to talk to them. They have to provide you
the opportunity to have counsel with you.
And you still don't have to talk to them. So that was the issue, was that people were being stopped. So in a 2-year period around the 2009, 2011, 1 million of these cards were put into the file. That's the magnitude of what was going on. And the studies show, the examination of that material, that it was disproportionately people with black skin that were being stopped and carded, as they said, with this information being put down. And then the further suggestion was that that data was then there, so if you were a perfectly innocent person that never had a run-in with the law, there could be a computer search done, and your name could show up as having had a contact with the police when in fact it was a contact the police initiated for no reason related to crime.
But then it wouldn't be very convincing evidence if you were prosecuted.
No, but you know, the point was more to say that why should a kid, black or white or brown or any other color, who's walking down the street, or an adult, be arbitrarily stopped? And in fact, I had an Iraqi couple come up to me the other night, because I did change my position on this. I tried to achieve a mediated sort of resolution to it, and found that the two sort of points of view on it were irreconcilable, it seemed. And so I felt quite strongly that it was better to opt then to do away with this practice and start over with a clean slate to find ways the police could do their job, but at the same time not randomly stop people. And I had this Iraqi couple I met who are now in Canada and here, and they stopped me at this same Luminato festival I mentioned and said to me, "Thank you for what you did on carding." And I said, "Well, thank you for thanking me. Why do you feel that way?" And they said, "We came from a place where when we saw a police officer, immediately were afraid, because we thought they were people who were going to arbitrarily stop us and who were going to ask us a bunch of questions when we were people just going about our business." And that encounter by itself, in addition to all of what I've heard from some of the young black kids and their parents who said, you know, we live in a country where we have fundamental rights and freedoms granted to us, including the sort of the freedom to go about your life and not be interfered with unless you've done something wrong, or unless you're suspected of doing something wrong, or you have evidence about something that's been done. And in this case, these were people who were just going about their business and were suspected of nothing.
Now, do you feel that it is improper and unacceptable for the police just to ask for identification, nothing else? Not saying, "What are you doing here?" or anything else?
I think they should have a reason to do it, and I think we've gone through this with a lot of cases that a lot of viewers across the country will know about in the context of these, what we call here in Toronto, a RIDE program, which is a program that stops people suspected of drinking and driving. And even there, the courts have said there are limits on what people can be subjected to in terms of because, you know, they've talked over time about having entirely random year-long stops of people just to see if they're drinking and driving.
And obligatory breathalyzers.
Yes, and the courts have put limits even on that and sort of said, well, we're not going to just have a situation where anybody can be stopped anytime for no reason at all. I actually feel that there's a limit to which all kinds of surveillance should be, and that kind of stuff should be exercised over people. That, you know, I want the security officials to do their job protecting us from terrorism. I want the police to keep us safe, but I also think we should, by and large, be able to sort of go about our business in a way, because that is what separates these kinds of countries from other countries, is that we have the freedom to go about our business, and unless the police have a reason to stop you, you know, that, and a reason can be they suspect you're drinking and driving, and I think we do seem to accept these random stops at Christmas time to see if people have been drinking. But there's got to be a limit on that, surely, in our country.
I'm not even in favor of that, by the way. But the
random stops for drinking and driving.
I think there has to be some reason to think
like if
that
you're
possibly
weaving down the street, it's okay. Yeah, look, that's clear to me. If you're weaving down the street, or if you're running away and there's a bank alarm going off, you know, I'd say, hey, I mean, the police have an obligation to stop you, and you have an obligation to stop and talk to them of why you're running away from that building. So this is where this carding discussion came from, and it came to be seen very much as an issue that was one of you know, racial bias, on the basis that if it was true,
racial profiling in the U.S.,
that young black men were being stopped all the time for no good reason, most of the time. I mean, some of them I'm sure there was reason, but some not, and that this was creating a culture of kind of fear and, you know,
and it was discrimination.
Yeah.
But the flip side is you get from, you know, our friends in the United States that absolutely exemplary people, even people with national security clearances of our pigmentation, are stripped in airports and so forth, like Ann Coulter, for example. I mean, I don't think she has a national security clearance, and has some strange views, but she's not going to blow an airplane up.
I had a good friend who was one of the leading executives in the country, and I won't name him because I wouldn't want to embarrass him, but he was a leading executive, but he was had brown skin. And every time, I've traveled with him quite a few times, and every time we check in at Air Canada, and this was a guy who's an exemplary citizen, an exemplary business executive, and he had a name that also would be one of those names that people might stereotype. And every time we checked in together, he was called off to a separate discussion, you know, as if he was kind of on a no-fly list, and he wasn't. But I saw it with my own eyes, and I thought to myself, well, this is appalling. I mean, that people who are just, innocent, even in, I understand the need to protect the country and protect community safety and all that, but I saw it.
Look, as a student, I probably like yourself, I used to travel a lot, and often there were a lot more dictatorships in the world then, and I was always very aware of just how authoritarian Franco's regime was, for example. Your papers could be demanded at any point by a uniformed person or someone with